Thank you for tuning in to this audio excerpt by a poet who has had a massive influence on my life, David Antin. My name is Jon Bernys. I'm often asked about the strange and unconventional nature of my work as a performance poet and composer, and I dedicate this recording to all of my friends who continue to encourage me to explain why I've committed my life to avant-garde art. This project is especially dedicated to the legacy of John Stuart Mill, who, I believe, understood the nature of genius better than anyone before or since. His insight is best captured in his statement that genius, quote-unquote, can only breathe freely in an atmosphere of freedom. A truth that governments around the world would do well to remember, from him and his story and history. I offer this to the friends and families of all future avant-garde artists. Here is my attempt. I was thinking about this while I was flying towards Iowa, and thinking about how everyone was going to be trying to locate the avant-garde, and about how almost everyone was going to agree that it would involve either shocking or making it new, and that I was supposed to be talking about this too. And I realized I was going to be confused because partially every role classically attributed to the avant-garde has been preempted by something else. And I reflected that I myself have never really had a clear image of what it was to be avant-garde. Though I've been thrust into the role often enough to know what it feels like to be avant-garde. A friend of mine had written a book, Marjorie Perloff had written a book dealing with American poetry as a kind of French connection, as opposed to the English connection, which is conventionally supposed for it in the schools. Now, I personally think there are many roots to contemporary American poetry. Certainly my poetry and the poetry I admire, but I also know what writing a book means. In a book, you have to organize your ideas, pretty much one thing at a time. If it's an important thing, and you want to really get it done, and this is a book designed to challenge what I have always thought of as the Anglophiliac model of American poetry that is so dominant in those literary strongholds east of the Mississippi or the Connecticut River, north of the Monongahela, that are so strongly devoted to the Anglican passion that they give. They give the impression of some kind of outpost in a novel by Huxley or Evelyn Waugh, where the people are sitting around on a veranda, slipping their ginslings in the shade of the local textile factory or integrated circuit fabricating plant, dreaming of playing polo or cricket or rugby in the greener, older playing fields at Eton or Harrow, which they may have never seen. Being often second-generation Eastern European Jews from Brooklyn or Queens, or Lithuanians from Indiana, or Lutherans from Wisconsin, and somehow they are gathered on the veranda in New Haven or Manhattan, in memory of the British Empire, of which they are among the last supports, and several columns of which this book is probably intended to take away, or maybe more precisely, this book's in only bringing the news to these outposts, that the British Empire has long since passed away, and that the messages from England would no longer be coming and had not been coming for a long time, and that there was a French connection as there is a Russian connection and a Spanish connection, and for many, a Chinese connection or Japanese connection. There are lots of connections in this world, but in a book, you have to do one thing at a time. The world may not happen one thing at a time, but in a book, you have to tell one thing at a time. My friend was invited to Washington to be a part of a discourse with some of these English emigres and refugees, among whom were numbered Errol Bloom and John Hollander and Richard Howard, who are certainly distinguished members of the refugee community. Now, Marjorie was giving a talk based on this last chapter of her most recent book, The Poetics of Indeterminacy, the last chapter of which happens to deal with John Cage, and with me and whatever differences there may be between Cage and me. And these are considerable. We were both obliterated by the righteous wrath of Errol Bloom, who had hardly heard more than our names when we denounced the proceedings as ridiculous and us as non-poets, and stormed off the stage. I was told about this performance of Bloom's, and though it was wonderful and forgot about it, but it was not long afterward that I was invited out to the very same place to do a talk, performance on the Folger Library's a little Shakespearean stage. And it happened that when I came to do the performance, I had something serious in mind, because a friend of mine had died 2 or 3 days before after a sudden and unexpected hospitalization from which we all had hoped she would come out alive. And I wanted to make my piece a kind of homage, a meditation and speculation on the nature of her life and death. So in the course of things, I told her story, or what I knew of it, and I tried to consider the nature of the fit between the life we lead and the death we get. And what I wanted to think about was whether there was such a fit, and if there was, what kind it was. And I did the best I could under the circumstances of being there. Then, which is my image of what an artist does and is, somebody who does the best he can under the circumstances, without worrying about making it new or shocking. Because the best you can do depends upon what you have to do and where. And if you have to invent something new to do the work at hand, you will. But not if you have a ready-made that will work and is close at hand, and you want to get on with the rest of the business. Then you'll pick up the tool that's there, a tool that somebody else has made that will work, and you'll lean on it and feel grateful when it's good to you for somebody else's work, and you'll think of him as a friend who would borrow as freely from you if he thought of it or needed to. Because there is a community of artists who don't recognize copyrights and patents, or shouldn't, except under unusual circumstances, who send each other tools in the mail or exchange them in conversations in a bar. Though I had a couple of friends from whom I got a lot of things in the mail, who got very nervous about exchanging things with each other because they had Alinea Sonnabend looking over their shoulders, and one of them got so distressed because he had Ileana looking over his shoulder, forbidding him to collaborate with the other friend, that when he wrote the text for the other's installation performance, he never put his name on it. But this is an unusual situation, and I only mention it because of that.